I want to thank Ginger and Leslie and Dell and everyone who worked on that. That was amazing. Thank you. Hi, I'm Pam Wojcik, President of SCMS, all business. On behalf of the Executive Council, it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome you to the 60th anniversary of the Society for Cinema and Media Studies, and particularly to the awards ceremony where we celebrate some of the best publications in cinema and media studies, as well as some of our most esteemed colleagues. 60 years ago, when the Society of Cinematologists met for their two-day business meeting at the NYU Faculty Club, then President Robert Gessner read the membership qualifications that had been sent to the then invitation-only 28-person membership. Quote, a devotion to the medium as craft and art, regardless of an individual's academic or professional position, a scholarly posture, tangible in writing, in works, and in teaching. The Society is a fellowship in spirit, in mind, and in performance. Secretary George Amberg reported on the first national conference, which had been held in Minnesota. The importance of the Minnesota conference, he said, was that people were willing to sit around for 3 days and talk about nothing else but film. The conference theme, toward a definition of cinema, was planned as a continuing title for all meetings. If they could see us now, 5 days of sitting around and talking about not just film, but the vast media landscape that now constitutes our discipline, and still trying to define this thing. To highlight our past, we'll be gathering as many of the living SCMS presidents who could attend for a group photo after this ceremony. Right now, I'd like them to stand and accept our thanks. Presidents. This conference is gargantuan and sometimes overwhelming to attend. Putting all the pieces together is an enormous undertaking and would not be possible without the tremendous efforts and good graces of a multitude of people. The program committee that read all your submissions, the board that vets special events and assigns all the committees, the SIGs and caucuses that propose and sponsor events, the awards committees who read dossiers and piles of books and essays to make their selections, the host committee, chaired this year by Kirsten Moana Thompson and James Tweedy, that helps plan events, produces the host guide, and works with local venues to make this an absolutely stunning conference. Where's Paula? Managing all this like a ringmaster is the program chair. This year, Paula Massoud served in this role and did a remarkable job, making it all seem effortless and even kind of fun. The names of all these people are listed in the thanks in the program, but please, if you're on the board, the program committee, an awards committee, the host committee, a sponsoring SIG or caucus, please stand up and accept our thanks. Next year we'll be in Denver. I encourage all of you to volunteer to be on the program committee or an awards committee. You can ask people, it's fun. Please also be sure to submit your books and essays to the various awards and to put in nominations for the Distinguished Pedagogy and Distinguished Career Awards. And also, we have a new Innovative Pedagogy Award. I want to thank the SCMS staff, our Executive Director, Jill Simpson, who worked with the host committee and event organizers to ensure a great conference, Thomas West, who stepped in to help put together the sessions, Margot Tivant, who handles our social media and communications, Irfana Inam, who helps keep us from going bankrupt, and Michael Kackman, who gives up a lot of his own conference time to take photographs for us. This conference truly would not happen without Leslie Lamont, who secures all our spaces, helps arrange special events, creates the program book, runs this award ceremony, among other jobs. Leslie's staff, Del Lamont, Ginger Lee, Sherry Reyna, and Bob and Robert Derryberry have become essential parts of the SCMS team. Thank you to them. I also want to single out our program coordinator, Molly Youngblood, who recently left SCMS. Molly helped shift us to a new online portal system a few years back, and her remarkable vision, energy, and tremendous good cheer have completely transformed the way we create the program. We thank her and we wish her well. I also want to especially thank Aviva Dov-Viban, our webmaster, who helps with the conference mobile app each year, as well as arranging videos and audio interviews for field notes and the conference, and who this year was absolutely essential in securing a new website design that we got a sneak peek of at the members' meeting and will be live soon after the conference Monday. New website. And Aviva is leaving us and taking up her new tenure-track position at Arizona State, and we're grateful for all her work for us. Thanks to our sponsors, an event like this could not happen without our sponsors. The University of Toronto, Ryerson, York University, and the Toronto International Film Festival, who all helped us so much last year in Toronto, came back this year with incredibly generous support. We love the Canadians. In addition, Georgia State University, Auburn University, the University of Texas at Dallas, the University of Iowa, Texas Tech, Seattle University, and the Seattle International Film Festival all helped make this conference possible, and we thank them very much as well. SCMS is more than a conference. It's a year-round organization with a lot of invisible work. The Board of Directors works year-round to ensure that the organization serves our members well. This year, our grad rep, Amber Hodge, finishes her tenure. She's been a terrific asset and worked really hard organizing the grad mentor session that's happening tomorrow morning. Board member Miriam Petty finishes her tenure. Her work with the caucuses and SIGs and her advocacy for you all has truly helped shift the conversation around issues of diversity, globalization, and access. Woo! Derek Compere also finishes his work on the board this year. Derek has been working with institutional members to create an annual breakfast meeting that enables our central institutions to come together and share best practices and concerns. So goodbye and thanks to all of them. And welcome to our new board members, our new president-elect, Priscilla Peña-Oval. Where's Priscilla? Raquel Gates, where's Raquel? Who's our member-at-large board member. Beth Corzo-Ducart, who has been elected for the precariously employed board seat. And our new grad student rep, Kara Dickerson. Please join us also in extending deep thanks to Michael DeAngelis, Lori Hitchcock-Morimoto, Gilberto Blasini, and Bailey Moorhead for their willingness to stand for office and for their ongoing service and commitment to the Society for Cinema and Media Studies. As we welcome our new president-elect, we have to say goodbye to Steve Cohen, our past president. Steve helped hire our executive director. He was the first president to work with Jill Simpson throughout his tenure. He helped define the role of the executive director and refigured the job of being president. He oversaw a lot of growth and change in the home office, as well as major changes to the conference structure, the introduction of new formats like the seminar, the addition of the new precarious board seat. As one of our board members said to me, it was important to Steve that everyone had a seat at the table. As president, Steve was truly a role model for listening to people, being open, keeping focus, and above all, having a tremendous sense of humor. In this, as in many other arenas, he's been an important mentor to me, and I will miss having him in the room as my consigliere. He supposedly retired a few years ago, but I haven't seen any sign of him slowing down or resting, so maybe we can get him back in some capacity. Please join me in thanking Steve and the rest. SCMS lost 4 cherished people this year, and I ask you now to have a moment of silence for them.
September settles softly, leaves are starting to fall. I recall the last time you were here, your laughter a melody that lingers still. There's a hole in my heart, and I carry it wherever I go, like a treasure that travels with me down every road. There's this longing, lonesome and deep, kinda bitter, kinda sweet. There's a hole in my heart in the shape of you. There's a hole in my heart. There's a hole in my heart, but it's in the shape of you.
And now we turn to the fun part, the awards. Our first is the Student Writing Award, which recognizes 3 students who show outstanding ability in film, TV, and/or media scholarship, and Kristen Hatch will present these awards.
Third place in the Student Writing Award goes to Cassandra Guan from Brown University for the Critique of Flowers, Ecology and Affect in the Era of Technical Reproduction. The committee admired Cassandra, the originality and eloquence of Cassandra Guan's essay, which takes as its starting point the surprising observation that in their infancy, new media technologies, from lithographs to photographs to cinema, have gravitated towards reproducing plant life. In her nuanced analysis, Guan explores the implications of this perennial preoccupation. And second place goes to Alan Daigle at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Milwaukee, I'm so sorry. In his provocative essay, Alan Daigle deftly traces the shared histories of cinema and science through a cultural analysis of optical glass and the anastigmatic lens. Daigle's well-theorized investigation demonstrates that industrialized vision is a product of the measurable precision that was the hallmark of the Zeiss lens and of lens-based practices that it afforded. And first place goes to Maureen Mock, who is at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, for her essay, "The Politics is Everybody's Business, Resurrecting Faye Emerson, America's Forgotten First Lady of Television." The committee was impressed by the way Maureen Mock's essay draws on a wealth of archival material, including kinescopes of the Faye Emerson show, to weave a compelling portrait of one of television's early innovators. Mock brings a lively writing style to her subject and demonstrates that Faye Emerson articulates articulated progressive political opinions and feminist ideas on commercial television in the midst of the McCarthy era and before the emergence of second-wave feminism. Mock argues that the Faye Emerson Show introduced a style of discourse and viewer interaction that continue to be the backbone of late-night television to this day. She demonstrates how Emerson wielded her femininity to talk back to those who tried to dismiss her and to voice her opinions about everything from America's involvement in the war in Korea to the establishment of the United Nations. With this paper, Mock contributes to the important work of restoring female pioneers to the history of film and media. And Christina Gerhardt will now present the dissertation award.
I'm a whole lot of woman from the way I walk and talk like this. I'm a whole lot of woman from the sound of my voice to the gloss on my lips. I'm a whole lot of woman.
I feel like I should dance up here. I'm really delighted to be giving out the dissertation award. The winner is Jordan Schoenig from the University of Chicago, and the title of his dissertation is Cinema's Motion Forms, Film Theory, the Digital Turn, and the Possibilities of the Cinematic Movement. It's remarkable in its clarity, its focus, rigor, and control of its materials. Schoenig's beautifully written, inclusive, and lucid study of motion forms offers much more than a developed theory and language for studying cinematic, photographic, and digital movement. Although this alone would already make his work an important contribution to the field, this highly reflexive work also yokes its careful study of motion to a compelling meditation on key principles of film theory and analysis, including their emphasis on space over time and on fragmentation over synthesis, while offering a phenomenological inquiry into motion as a way to rethink the very nature of cinematic experience. As Schoenig points out, cinematic motion fundamentally changes not only what it records, but also what constitutes our perception of motion in the world. Each chapter of this important and compelling work focuses on a specific and carefully selected motion form from a different vantage point in film history. 1, contingent motion in early cinema. 2, habitual gestures in post-war realist film. 3, spatial unfurling. And 4, bleeding pixels produced by digital cinema's compression glitches. Focusing on the habitual, the gestures, the barely perceived and contingent, such as dust, the movement of air or fire, Schoenig draws on philosophy from Kant to Bergson and on film theory to consider how discrete motion forms help resituate ontological arguments about media, as well as their attractions to audiences. In the process, he challenges some of the key tenets and established beliefs about movement in film theory, contributing thereby an original and important argument that revises readings both of films and also of film theory. The maturity and the scope of his work is absolutely stunning, and his dissertation represents a significant and important intervention into film and digital theory, one that is also noteworthy as an important work of media historiography. Congratulations, Jordan. Jennifer Peterson will now present the award for First Best Book, Best First Book.
Oh, yeah!
All right. The award for Best First Book goes to Aubrey Annable, Assistant Professor at Carleton University, for her book Playing with Feelings, Video Games and Affect from the University of Minnesota Press, 2018. Audrey Annable's Playing with Feelings is sure to make a significant impact in the discipline of cinema and media studies. It not only contributes to game studies, it also makes an important intervention in affect theory. In 4 elegant chapters on history, touch, labor, and failure, Playing with Feelings makes a persuasive argument for video games as, quote, interfaces for grasping contemporary structures of feeling. Annabelle provides analysis of casual games such as Candy Crush Saga, Plants vs. Zombies 2, and Diner Dash, as well as indie games such as Kentucky Route Zero, Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery, and Nidhogg. Annabelle approaches video games not as liberatory or repressive, but as affective systems. She argues that video games are ordinary, part of our everyday culture, not exactly normative, but a whole way of life. Engaging with key video game theorists such as Alexander Galloway and Ian Bogost, Annabelle offers a critique of the surface depth, self-other, and inside-outside distinctions that persist in the field. She writes, I propose a model that attends to surfaces of screens and bodies, not as sites of secondary expression, but rather as crucial sites of touch and entanglement, where representation still matters and representation is matter. In remaining committed to close analysis in the face of the divide between computation and representation in game studies, Playing with Feelings makes a case for the continued importance of representation in media studies more generally. The committee appreciated how Annabelle sees her intervention in the field of game studies in specifically feminist terms, not by merely writing women into the history of gaming or arguing about the representation of female bodies, but by encouraging us as media critics to, quote, stay in the dark, looking at fragments, feeling our way around the neglected objects of video game culture and overlooked modes of play that might produce feminist gaming histories and cultures that are more expansive than what Laura Croft's body signifies. Annabelle's approach connects video games to other media histories and to larger aesthetic questions. Drawing upon the work of Sarah Ahmad and Sayan Nagai, she writes, quote, aesthetics are always a negotiation between that which is seen and that which is felt, and this necessarily has effects on the mediation of identities and subjectivities. In rigorously applying these questions to video games, Annabelle opens the door of game studies to non-experts. The quality of research and depth of analysis in this book are exemplary. Annabelle's writing is concise, confident, filled with surprises, and a genuine pleasure to read. We encourage everyone who thinks about the world of contemporary media to read this book. It will not be a waste of your time. Congratulations, Aubrey.
That's just the way you make me feel. That's just the way you make me feel. So that's just the way you make me feel.
That's just the way you make me feel. I love you so,
So sorry. Forgot the last part of my duty, which is to hand the torch over to my colleague here. Hong Tan Nguyen will now present the Catherine Singer Kovacs Book Award.
Tonight, I'm gonna have myself a real good time. I feel alive.
Okay. The Catherine Singer Kovacs Book Award goes to Susan Murray, Bright Signals, A History of Color Television, from Duke University Press, from 2018. It took the movies over 35 years to develop a color process that could be used conveniently, if very expensively, to reproduce some version of lifelike images, even if oversaturated. Before 3-strip Technicolor, there had been many experiments in color processes to lend the movies a spectacle that appeared lacking in black and white. From the laborious process of hand painting frame by frame, to tinting entire sequences, to 2-strip Technicolor, along with other most long forgotten processes, color was only gradually introduced to the cinema. It was not until over 50 years after the introduction of film that Eastman Kodak come up with a convenient, inexpensive color process, the monopack Eastman Color. And over 65 years since the Lumiere brothers introduced the cinema before the vast majority of films were made in color in the US. Television could broadcast in color just a few years after TV sets were common. It turned out to be a hard sell, but even so, it was only about 15 years after its widespread saturation of the American market that color was common. Yet, television scholars, not to mention most of the general public, have taken color TV for granted. No longer. Susan Murray's book represents meticulous historical research, the kind that racks up frequent flyer miles and wears out expensive shoe leather. The author traveled to archives in far-flung corners of the U.S., consulting memos, letters, unpublished memoirs, and various arcana and ephemera to construct a wide-ranging history. It also represents a major contribution to cultural studies and critical theory. We might say that much of cultural studies came about because of television. Its ubiquity in the home and its obvious and sometimes hidden influences made it of primary concern with those who wish to understand society, social interactions, beliefs, and shifts. Here is a work that returns us to television, to cultural studies, and adds immeasurably to our understanding of the most important medium of the 20th century. People without color television are as rare as hen's teeth, and so is a work of such foundational scholarship as Bright Signals, A History of Color Television. Congratulations to Susan Murray. Okay, my colleague, Al Martin, will now present the Catherine Singer Kovacs Essay Award.
Those who know me in the room knows that that is so darn brilliant. I'm not gonna swear in a room full of folks I don't all know. But anywho, all right, so I am here to present the Kovacs Essay Award to Aswin Punathambekar and Shram Mohan, A Sound Bridge, Listening for the Political in a Digital Age. This essay, A Sound Bridge, expertly combines insights from media studies, film studies, and sound studies to situate a phenomenon within both India-specific and globalized media contexts. The essay makes a clear case for the specificity of oral practices, as well as their complex multimodal functions within participatory cultures. It also productively reflects, and even better, often reflects upon, the influence of high-profile turns in the humanities, such as the sonic turn, the affective turn, and the global turn, while offering something wholly its own in its theorization of the sound bridge as a communicative infrastructure for political participation. In addition to providing a framework for understanding the concept of the sound bridge, it works as a rhetorical structure linking cinema and media studies, and is thus particularly resonant at this moment in the history of the Society for Cinema and Media Studies. Congratulations, Aswin and Shram. And now I turn it over to Jamie Barron, who will present the Best Edited Collection Award.
And I'm feeling good.
So it's my pleasure to present the award for Best Edited Collection to Joshua Neves and Bhaskar Sarkar for Asian Video Cultures in the Penumbra of the Global by Duke University Press. In its scope, Asian Video Cultures in the Penumbra of the Global covers an astounding breadth of national contexts, industrial scales, media forms, and audience practices. Taken as a whole, this collection provides an impressive and innovative model for thinking about contemporary media studies and cultures simultaneously at the national, transnational, and subnational levels. Editors Joshua Neves and Bhaskar Sarkar have accomplished a major organizational feat in curating the essays, which range from considerations of K-pop video culture to Indonesian social media platforms to the documentation of people living with HIV/AIDS in Imphal, India. As a committee, we were particularly impressed by how the broad variety of topics is matched by the diverse array of theoretical and methodological lenses that frame each of the contributions. In our view, beyond its own substantial accomplishments, this collection also has the potential to serve as a radical new model for future work on contemporary media on both a global and local scale. Congratulations, Joshua and Bhaskar. And now Sarah Barrow will present the best essay, the award for the best essay in an edited collection.
There's a hope that's waiting for you in the dark. You should know you're beautiful just the way you are.
So, a great pleasure to present the Best Essay in an Edited Collection award. The winner is Nilo Curate, Enduring Art Cinema in the Routledge Companion to Latin American Cinema, edited by Marvin Lugo, Anna Lopez, and Laura Podolsky, published by Routledge. The committee for this award found Nilo's essay to be extremely well written and thoughtfully argued, taking a well-trodden area in American and European film culture and refashioning it into a significant intervention into scholarship on Latin American cinema, and thereby treading new ground for Latin American film scholarship. As such, we found it offers a new way of understanding realism in the context of Latin American cinema. The article also offers a lively, engaging and astute analysis of works by two important, sometimes overlooked, contemporary directors from the region, Alonso and Escalante, while also making powerful connections to the specific experience of neoliberalism. More generally, we were impressed by the range of essays that we saw, and particularly those that explored the diversity of cinema and media studies fields, or which raised timely issues with new and provocative perspectives. Congratulations, Nilo. Now hand over to Zoran Zavadisha, who will present the Anne Friedberg Innovative Scholarship Award.
I'm too neurotic to relax. So the Anne Friedberg Innovative Scholarship Award goes to Shannon Mattern, Code and Clay, Data, Dirt, 5,000 Years of Urban Media. Pardon me. Shannon Mattern's book is a beautifully researched and uniquely materialist study of how mud, concrete, wires, steel, ink, data, and communication networks have functioned as media infrastructure in the design of cities throughout history. Mattern provocatively synthesizes discourses from media studies, urban studies, and built environment and architecture in order to argue that the city has always been a media city. As the description of the award states, quote, the Anne Friedberg Award recognizes innovative work that expands the discipline of film and media studies, emphasizing its relationship to other fields, including architecture, art history, and digital media. The committee unanimously believes that code plus clay, data plus dirt significantly expands the interdisciplinary possibilities for media studies and challenges our understanding of the historical relationship between analog and digital media. The committee would also like to praise the readability and the organization of the book. So congratulations to Shannon.
This is America. Don't got you slipping now. Don't got you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. This is America. Don't got you slipping now. Don't got you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now. This is America.
And now I hand it over to Pam.
Fairy tales can come true. It can happen to you.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be giving the Distinguished Service Award to Aviva Dove Viban at Arizona State. For 7 years, Aviva has served as our website content manager. In that capacity, she maintained the SCMS website, handled elections, surveys, initiated and managed the mobile app for the conference, developed our social media presence, created a state-of-the-field report on film and media programs across North America, organized videographers for the conference and for field notes, and this year oversaw the website redesign that will go live Monday. We would be using typewriters without her. So thank you to Aviva. And now Adam Nee will present the Distinguished Pedagogy Award.
So it's my pleasure to present the Pedagogy Award to Charlie Kyle of the University of Toronto. It is our honor to recognize Dr. Kyle's outstanding pedagogical contributions to the field of cinema and media studies. The committee has read his materials with great pleasure. We were struck by two particularly notable qualities in his dossier. First, Dr. Kyle's commitment to the needs and goals of individual students emerges with great clarity in the range of letters written in support of his nomination. We were moved by the evidence of his generosity, kindness, enthusiasm, and deep knowledge of film history that is consistently reflected in letters provided by his students, teachers, and colleagues alike, ranging from current undergraduate students to his former graduate school professor mentor, Donald Crafton. The committee was also deeply impressed by his commitment to issues of social justice, and specifically by his work to create scholarships for students who struggle for access to educational opportunities. His efforts to develop scholarships for Indigenous students, refugee students, as well as for women will, like his curricular work, have a lasting impact on students who might never even have the pleasure of being in his classroom. Cumulatively, these heartfelt letters shed light on Dr. Kyle's unwavering commitment to his students, to their intellectual development and their accomplishments. They also reveal Dr. Kyle's outstanding pedagogical skills. As a teacher, he is guided by rigorous standards, compassion, and generosity, while remaining dedicated to innovative course design and to inclusivity. As he writes in his teaching statement, quote, "If I teach with and mentor with fervor and commitment, I do so because, above all else, teaching entails an immensely gratifying responsibility to others." Charlie Kyle, currently principal of Innis College and professor of the Cinema Studies Institute and the Department of History at the University of Toronto, has transformed a small undergraduate-only program into a thriving department. Having served as the first director of the University of Toronto Cinema Studies Institute from 2007 to 2014, Dr. Kyle has played a critical role in developing curriculum, recruiting faculty and students, and championing cinema studies at the institution. Under his leadership, the program has flourished. Having consolidated the undergraduate major, he introduced a graduate program, first creating an MA and subsequently founding one of Canada's few PhD programs in cinema studies. As an expert in early American cinema, Dr. Kyle has taught a wide range of undergraduate and graduate courses ranging from early cinema, film and authorship, key developments in film history to film historiography and models of film analysis. Committed to curriculum development, he led a review of curriculum and pedagogical practices at the college to observe the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Report, which led to the founding of an Indigenous Teaching Committee. Furthermore, he also worked on integrating internships and other forms of experiential learning into the programs of study and, in the process, initiated an Indigenous pedagogical practices strategy. A passionate advocate of film culture, Dr. Kyle is equally devoted to educational outreach. He has contributed teaching and advising to high schools and programs of later life learning, public lectures in his community, as well as numerous media interviews. As his nominees state, he has been serving as a voice for cinema studies in Canada. While his innovative pedagogical practices, teaching excellence, and compassionate mentorship have been generously praised by his students and admired by his peers, it is equally important to mention that his scholarship is pedagogy-oriented. His books on early American cinema, editing, and special effects were conceived as textbooks, extending his research to classroom use. For 20 years, Dr. Kyle has dedicated himself to teaching excellence. His deep regard for diversity, his integration of research with pedagogy, his commitment to train students in understanding the historiographical method, his admirable mentoring skills, and his substantial contributions in the areas of both curriculum development and program leadership fully embody the principles of the Distinguished Pedagogy Award. Charlie.
I'm breaking with convention by taking over the mic, but I'm going to channel my inner Olivia Colman and be sufficiently charming that you maybe won't notice. The reason I'm at the mic when this is not the convention will be obvious in a moment, but I do want to take this opportunity to say a couple of things. First of all, it's such an honor to share this ceremony with Don Crafton, who was my PhD supervisor, and he and Susan are two of the most delightful people you'll ever meet, as I'm sure most of you in the room know. The second thing is that I thought it would be a good opportunity to encourage those of you who know a good teacher, pedagogue, mentor, to put that person's name in for the nomination. It's so humbling to see what people have to say about your teaching and the effect you may have had on them. And I think there's many people out here who are probably more deserving of this award than me. So take that opportunity to put in the name and start the process for someone who is deserving of this honor. I want to thank the people in the room here who contributed to the dossier: Corinne Columpar, Lisa Coulthard, Paul Montecone, and Don. And especially, and this is why I was given this opportunity, one of the people who wrote was a student I taught more years ago than probably either of us want to remember, who was herself, and still is, an Indigenous person. She wrote me a heartfelt account of what it had meant for me to spend the time I did with her, not knowing at all on my part the transformational effect our relationship had on her. And she took the time to drive from Vancouver, where she now lives, to this ceremony to witness this because, as she has said, one always honors a relationship of this nature. And so Nadia Belikopetov, who's here with her nephew Thomas, filming this. And sending it to Lee Carruthers and Charles Tepperman from the University of Calgary, who couldn't be here, who were the nominators for this. I honor you. I'm wearing the tie she gave me, which features a raven, the symbol for teaching in her culture. And lastly, I've taken up way more time than I think anyone wanted to give me. I have to thank my life partner, Kathy, who in a week of very troubling times for her, made the effort to come with me, which I'm getting verklempt, so I can't thank her enough. Thank you.
So we've reached the Distinguished Career Achievement Award, and I wanted to say I was incredibly happy to find out that it was going to be Don Crafton this year, because Don gave me my job at the University of Notre Dame 21 years ago. He's been an amazing mentor, a fantastic friend. He's Don. So Heather Hendershot is going to come on up and give the award. Thanks, Heather.
Richard Hofstadter once famously derogated historians who dug deeply into primary documents as archive rats. Those of us in film and media studies who are devoted to archival research cannot help but wonder at this famous historian's glib attitude toward the difficult, slow, and often dusty work that we value so highly. Archival research is not for the impatient, the disorganized, or the asthmatic. Above all, archival work is not centrally about finding needles in haystacks, though
though it is delightful when that happens, but rather about sifting through the meaning of all the hay, about finding ways to make sense of the artifacts that could mean any number of things, and about sorting out the process of heuristic narration. The stories that emerge from this work may be disproven later, but we have to do the best we can now, given what we know. At all of this, Donald Crafton, the recipient of the SCMS 2019 Distinguished Career Achievement Award, excels. Our award recipient has been widely recognized for his work and has been awarded for his scholarship by the Jean Vigo Institute and the International Animation Festival in Zagreb. In 2001, he was named an inaugural Academy Film Scholar by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. He's received 2 fellowships from the National Endowment for the Humanities and has been a fellow of the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation. Crafton has also mentored multiple generations of students at Yale, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Notre Dame. He founded and directed the Yale Film Study Center from 1982 to 1986, and directed the Wisconsin Center for Film and Theater Research from 1987 to 1994. Appointed an emeritus professor in 2017, Crafton held the first endowed professorship in film studies at the University of Notre Dame. He's been an editorial board member of numerous journals, including our own Cinema Journal, now the Journal of Cinema and Media Studies. Further, he's currently co-editor with Susan Omer of The Moving Image, the Journal of the Association of Moving Image Archivists. Don Crafton's work has set a high standard for historical scholarship and also has contributed vitally to the study of animation within our field. His first monograph, Before Mickey, the animated film 1898 to 1928, was first published in 1982 and reprinted in 1993. It was a landmark study that still remains unsurpassed. While Crafton brought the study of animation into the study of cinema, he also insisted that any previous separation had been somewhat artificial. As he observes in his 1990 book, Emile Cole, Caricature and Film, quote, "Animation is integral to film history and art history and cannot be cordoned off for separate analysis." In his Film Quarterly review of The Talkies, Crafton's 1997 contribution to the Monumental History of American Cinema series, Dana Poland writes, "Arguing that The Coming of Sound was far from the revolutionary event that legend and the standard accounts of cinema history represent it as, Don Crafton's rich, powerful, and packed book brings its own revolution to film historiography." Poland aptly concludes that The Talkies is quite simply a wonderful book that takes its place among the very top works of American film history. Those of us who have read it and, of course, used it in the classroom cannot help but agree. When Crafton's brilliant 2013 book, Shadow of a Mouse, Performance, Belief, and World-Making in Animation, was conferred an Anne Freeberg Innovative Scholarship Award of Distinction by SCMS, the citation from the award committee praised the author for opening up, quote, "intriguing new perspectives on animation, particularly the 1930s work of Disney Studio, and interrogating issues of audiovisual style, embodiment, affect, politics, and production. Written in probing, thorough, and consistently witty prose, the committee concluded, this book will transform the study of animation and offer substantial theoretical challenges to media studies more broadly." So many of us think of Crafton as a key scholar of the filmic past, but it is important also to remember that Shadow of a Mouse ends on a note of not the analog, but the digital. "Perhaps the greatest irony of the motion picture," he writes, "is that it is no longer made of shadows. With the advent of digital displays, the light of the cinema, including animation, shines from screens, as it does from the sun, and no longer reflects as from the moon. Our final conundrum is, if the animated images we see are formed by intensely radiant pixels instead of light escaping through the translucent emulsion of film stock and bouncing off a surface, will that affect the way that we model our lives around cinema and cartoons and vice versa? As we watch them on our screens, how will we respond to and embody animated beings when it is the light of their tuned bodies that generates our shadows? It is a conclusion that we must admire both for its perceptiveness and its stylistic flair." I've spoken here of all 4 of Crafton's monographs, but he's also written many essays, including the brilliant Pie and Chase, Gag, Spectacle, and Narrative in Slapstick Comedy, which demonstrates how, quote, "the seeming hegemony of narrative in the classical cinema is assaulted by the militant forces of spectacle." A crucial contribution to the field's long-running discussion of the cinema of attractions, the essay offers nothing less than a pie in the face to the notion that classical Hollywood narrative is consistently able to, or even intends to, contain its moments of comic excess. The analysis centers on films of the 1920s, but it might just as well be speaking of contemporary comedy. Consider the relationship between linear narrative and the incessant gags of films like Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox Story, Talladega Nights, or even the drunk history episode on Nikola Tesla, to cite examples from the John C. Reilly of Alone. Anyone who has seen the Fleischer Brothers' 1931 film, Bimbo's Initiation, is aware that the best answer to the question, "Want to be a member?" is yes. We of the Society for Cinema and Media Studies are so very lucky that Crafton became a member of our ranks some 30 years ago. On behalf of the Distinguished Career Achievement Committee and of the membership at large, I'm delighted to present this award to our own Donald Crafton.
Well, thank you, Heather. That was a work of art in itself. And thanks, Pam, of course, wherever she went there. She is friend, colleague, and president. Hashtag no collusion. I'm grateful to Antonia Lant and for the nominators who wrote on my behalf. Why, I don't know, but so thank you. The selection committee, having been on that committee, it's a job that demands a lot of your personal time and with no acknowledgement or remuneration. Thank you so much. My many mentors and colleagues throughout the years, too numerous to mention. You know who you are if you're still alive. The amazing students, both undergraduate and graduate, many of whom are in the room. Thank you. My greatest devotion is to Susan Omer, a brilliant scholar, archivist, SCMS Dissertation Award winner, and administrator who has been my muse, my colleague, my lover, my fellow film freak for more than 20 years, and who against the odds make me a fan of opera. Many thanks to you all. This award means so much to me. Since I've never received a Career Achievement Award before, I asked around to see what might be expected in an acceptance speech. The strongest recommendation was not to delay the access to the bar. Heard and noted. So I will constrain my windy nature and try to stick to the script as much as possible. Second, they told me it should be inspiring, especially to the young people in the field. So my first word of inspiration is, I met Susan at an SCMS conference. So look around. There's a reception. Enough said. So it has proven to be very difficult to single out a universally applicable inspirational thought. So I thought I would begin simply by sharing my own career story with you, and we'll see what happens. Perhaps a good place to begin is with Laika, a Samoyed and terrier mix impounded from the streets of Moscow, who was shot into space aboard Sputnik 2 in November of 1957. We could call her First Dog. This mutt scared the crap out of the scientists in the Eisenhower Congress, which enacted the National Education Defense Act less than a year later. Accordingly, when my family released me to the nurturing University of Michigan, the NDEA paid for every cent of my tuition and expenses for 4 years. Have we forgotten that there are entire generations of scholars and teachers out there who came to fruition because of the support and encouragement of state and federal governments? Have we forgotten that being able to take people of humble means and send them to the university is the great source of the knowledge and the future of tomorrow. So inspiration, number 3 is support politicians who will fight to restore faith and respect for everyone pursuing education careers. We have an interest in rewarding good students, not crushing them with demoralizing debt. And when you can, give something back to the school that made you what you are. The expectation for me in the 1960s was that I would win the Cold War as a rocket scientist. But I fell in with bad company. There was a tiny clique of student movie enthusiasts and an even smaller cadre of professors who, although there was no such thing as film studies back then, tolerated my proto-academic writing when I approached movies as works of art and tokens of the films and places of their production. But even the university was just a station along the way, not the starting point for my interest in film. Now, a little digression that will redeem itself. I'm certain that each of you has had to answer the question, what is your favorite movie, game, cable TV, series, whatever? Most recently, I was seated at a dinner next to a bureaucrat from our Midwestern city. After I revealed my interest in film, he was dead set on making conversation and asked the inevitable, "What's your favorite movie?" I gave him my stock answer, The Searchers with John Wayne. Now, The Searchers is always somewhere in my list of favorite films. John Wayne is not. The actor's neo-fascist politics and invidious racism have been public knowledge for decades. Nevertheless, his performance in this film is amazing as the tormented anti-hero. It's astonishing. An honest list of my favorite films would fluctuate every day. Today it's Custom Car Commandos, the Kenneth Anger film, a tribute to boys polishing their fetishized muscle cars with big powder puffs. Bruce Bailey's All My Life is a minimalist one-shot pan across a rambling rose set to the Ella Fitzgerald song of that title. It achieves a zen-like sublimity. Bruce Connor's collages, A Movie and Cosmic Ray, are cinematic apocalypses. Sometimes I still mirthfully recall a film that I wrote a term paper on for my Iowa professor, Dudley Andrew, Liberation of Manique Mécanique by Stephen Arnold. For 15 minutes, the film creates a pulsating miasma of faces, outrageous costumes and flesh, enacting a ritual in which the camera is a protagonist, and where in the orgasmic finale, the filmmaker creates a performance piece in which he becomes one with his own cinema. My favorite D.W. Griffith film, it's from 1909, The Country Doctor. The physician must make a horrible sacrifice. Which child must he let die? His poor neighbor's girl or his own sick daughter? For classic Hollywood, it's hard to know where to begin. I would have to include William Wyler's back-to-back masterpieces, Mrs. Miniver and The Best Years of Our Lives. Foreign film, in addition to the entire French New Wave, there's Mephisto, the Hungarian film made in 1981 about how complacency paved the way for Adolf Hitler. Unfortunately, is becoming more prophetic with each passing month. My favorite auteur, Jean Vigo. Contemporary films, I don't know, Son of Saul, The Fantastic Woman, Roma. I can't forget animation. Any number of Japanese anime would qualify. But for perversity and visual shock, Emile Cole's Retapeur de Cervelle, Brains Repaired, from 1911, is still hard to beat. As for my coffin film, the one reel I'd want to accompany me to immortality, that would be Chuck Jones, One Froggy Evening, with its singing and dancing frog. My keenest passion, though, has always been for film noir. Whether it's Peggy Cummins in Gun Crazy, Burt Lancaster in The Killers, Robert Mitchum in Out of the Past, Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity, or Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham in A Lonely Place, these are quintessentially perfect actors in perfectly crafted, compelling, violent existential puzzles without obvious solutions. But how many of these cinematic moments can the casual conversation take in? Just saying The Searchers usually satisfies my inquisitor and the conversation moves on. But this time my newfound companion wouldn't let me go. Why is The Searchers, which he had never heard of, my favorite film? Well, I have a prepared response for that too. It was directed by John Ford, perhaps America's greatest director, and besides, Roger Ebert and the Library of Congress have said so. No, that's not what I mean, he interjects. What I want to know is, what does that film really mean to you? I stammer a bit, and mercifully and coincidentally, the dessert arrived just as he had to beat a hasty retreat to the lavatory. Nevertheless, his insistent question haunted me. Explaining the greatness of Ford's cinema is a lot easier than explaining the greatness of an out-of-focus, overexposed 16mm film about a gay orgy or a singing frog cartoon, or any kind of cartoon. But really, what is the deeper reason? This leads to my second inspirational suggestion. Take time to look inside yourself to see what fundamentally makes you love cinema and media. For me, these insights are very personal and bound up in autobiography. Why did seeing The Searchers in 1956 become a fixation for me? So much so that 63 years later, I still offer it up as my favorite. I've tried watching it again through the eyes of my 9-year-old self. As it turns out, 8 or 9 was the screen age of little Debbie Edwards, one of the settler's daughters who was captured. Ford's mise-en-scène isolates the girl visually and psychologically from her family when she goes off to hide in the graveyard.
Chris, go back! Go back, Chris! Go back! Chris! Go back! Go back, Chris! Chris, go back! Go back, Chris! Chris!
Ford uses the family dog to stitch together the two spaces, using psychology to create suspense. Being the same age as Debbie, I must have been profoundly terrified when the painted brave silently appears. His menacing shadow symbolically presses her against the tombstone of her ancestor, who, as the epitaph ominously tells us, had been killed by Comanches in her 41st year. Back then, I would not have noticed that Scar was not played by a Native American actor. Later, I would become aware of the racist subtext of the Westerns, and John Ford's in particular. And much later, I would appreciate how The Searchers was, in fact, a crack in the crystal, a time when Ford himself was starting to question his own approach and his own understanding of Native American history. This, however, was not the scene that traumatized me. That happened when, in pursuit of the marauding Indians, the settlers discover a heavy stone.
Another one, huh? Give me a hand, Charlie.
This has come a long way before he died, Captain.
Well, Ethan, there's another one you can score up for your brother.
I don't like it.
What don't you like?
Indians on the raid generally hide their dead. And if they don't care anything about us knowing, it only spells one thing. They ain't afeard of us following or of us catching up with them either.
You can back out any time you want, Nesby.
Ethan, I didn't say that. Didn't say such.
Easy, Nesby, easy.
Jorgensen.
Why don't you finish the job?
What good did that do you?
Why, what you preach, none. But what that Comanche believes, ain't got no eyes, he can't enter the spirit land, has to wander forever between the winds. You get it, Reverend. Come on, Blankethead.
The image of a stone in the desert that unexpectedly discloses a body is horrifying enough. But then when Ethan callously shoots out the corpse's eyes, even though the target is not shown in close-up, well, that was just too much. Nightmares ensued. Perhaps the self-evident truth of the Native Americans' belief in the sanctity of vision, that there was no heaven for those without sight, and by extension, no movies. Maybe that was the scariest message. It wasn't only the film The Searchers that was part of my formative movie experience, it was also the time and the place. I saw it in the Rapids Theater in Eaton Rapids, Michigan, population of about 3,500, where my family had lived since 1953. Every Friday we would devour cheeseburgers at the beanery around the corner and then line up for the 7 o'clock movie, and there always was a line. Built in 1950, it had some 600 seats and a cry room where mothers could take their rambunctious and or hungry infants to be rocked to sleep and or nursed without having to miss any of the action on the screen. What I still remember is the smell, a malodorous bouquet of scorched popcorn, disinfectant urinal cakes, a whiff of baby effluent from that cry room, and the general exhalations of a couple of hundred bodies in one not too well air-conditioned auditorium. Yet this was the space of my dreams, funny, sad, lovely, horrible. I would have olfactory flashbacks to this fleur de mal much later when I began attending screenings at the Giuseppe Verdi Cinema in Pordenone, Italy. Now demolished, it had been built around the same time as the Rapids, and though separated by continents, it shared its aromatic ambience. I broached my autobiographical theory of cinephilia with some of you who have reacted with, I have to say, varying degrees of credulity. I hypothesize that we film and media studies types are especially curious about the culture and its productions that prevailed at the time of our birth and early childhood. Well, this isn't really a scientific theory like astronomy, it's more like astrology. And although you might think it simple vanity, I like to call it introspection. I think this explains why, for me, film noir has always been a kind of body memory. So to prepare for this talk, I put my theory to a test. In fact, it was the ultimate test. The unequivocal empirical results established the genetic beginning of my film career. I knew that my mom and dad enjoyed dancing and going to the show practically every Saturday in Springfield, Missouri, where I was born. What memorable films of the post-war period were they seeing on the screen, starting at 9 months before my birth? Thanks to our interlibrary loan department, I obtained the Springfield Leader and Press for Saturday, July 27th, 1946, and made good reading. This is how the business district known as Park Central Square looked around 1945, with a good view of the crowds lining up to see Merrill Oberon and Franchot Tone in Dark Waters at the Electric Theater. I like to imagine, without any evidence whatsoever, that my future parents are the girl and her beau in his service uniform sitting on top of that jalopy. On that fateful night in 1946, it was at the ornate Giglio's, the 1926 Picture Palace across the square, where my parents saw the film that evidently put them in the very mood that planted the seed, as it were, of my career in the movies. My mom confirmed to me a couple of weeks ago that she and Dad saw this film. I didn't ask her to confirm all the details. Reception study has its limits. She did volunteer, though, that most of their activity in movie theaters had nothing to do with the movies. The film was Lana Turner and John Garfield in MGM's iconic noir adaptation of James M. Cain's hard-boiled crime novel, The Postman Always Rings Twice. Mom told me that they could never figure out what that title meant. There was also a Disney cartoon, but that might be pushing my theory too far.
Well, right now I got a certain trouble that keeps me from working. You look healthy. My feet. They keep itching for me to go places. But it's a nice place you got around here. How's the food?
I'll make you a wonderful hamburger, free of charge.
Yeah?
Just to show you the kind of food that goes with the job. You know anything about automobiles?
Oh, I'm a born mechanic.
Well.
In retrospect, I can see how this film might have been memorable for my parents. Like Garfield, my father was a fresh veteran with ambition, but also with wanderlust and an eye for the ladies. His job was flipping cheeseburgers in a diner. In due course, I came along. Like the films Frank and Cora, and maybe a little like Ethan Edwards, my parents had itchy feet. Unlike their screen counterparts, they did not murder anyone, but soon they would embark on their own odyssey through the Southwest, California, and Wenatchee, Washington, the self-proclaimed apple capital of the world, 150 miles up the river from Seattle, and then work back again. With their 2 little boys in tow, they followed the migrating western harvest picking fruit. The scent of orchard warehouses merged with old movie houses. These childhood journeys in memory have become plot points in my life, my inherited cinephilia, and the pentimenti of my own quests for identity. So my final inspiration homily to you is, find your own career story. Ask why certain works, texts, and events have become talismans for you. Look inside yourself to understand your own searches for fulfillment, whether in the arts, athletics, academics, or whatever. Our family had little spare change, but we always had time to attend the show. Friday nights came, we sought out cheeseburgers, got in line, participated in the community ritual of a shared spectacle with our fellow sweaty travelers, and immersed ourselves in cinematic worlds designed to spawn dreams and nightmares wherever we were. I guess that's why The Searchers is my favorite film. Thank you so much. I yield the podium back to the Madam President.
That's how you give a speech, people. I'm starting to believe your theory. I'm starting to believe it. Okay, so Who can say anything after that? There's drinks. Go have drinks, we'll toast on, and we'll see you all for the rest of the conference. I need the presidents for just a couple minutes. And thank you all for being here, for doing your thing. That was amazing.